Happy to be joined by one half of the UFC Fight Night 219 headliner, Cory Sandhagen. He takes on Marlon Vera. Cory, how are you? Happy holidays and Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy holidays to you too. How you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm assuming you couldn't enjoy the holidays too much because, of course, of the weight cut and everything.
Yeah, kind of, I guess. The holidays aren't really too much special for me. Like, it's just me, my mom, dad, sister out here, and they just live like 20 minutes away. So it's just kind of like every other day, and then just hanging out with my fiance's family. So I enjoyed them a little bit. I went to bed at like 10 on New Year's, and then slept like 12 hours. So I enjoyed that a lot more than what I would have done out of camp. So.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, you got the fight you wanted, right? You had asked, like, after you beat Song Yadong, you had expressed, you mentioned Merab and you mentioned Marlon, and you got that fight. But it appeared they had offered it November 5, is that correct? Like a main event there on short notice, and you weren't too fond of that idea, right? Because it was only like 3 weeks or something?
Yeah, it was like 3 weeks away when they offered me that fight, and my hand was still hurting a little bit from the fight. I like how soon would that have been after that fight? It would have been maybe like a month after the fight or something. I'm really bad with
Yeah.
dates. Yeah. So, I would just rather a full camp to fight Cheeto. I didn't really see a point in rushing, especially because I figured that I was going to get a good fight anyway. So that's kind of how that all happened.
Yeah, fair enough. Exactly. Like, why do that? Yeah, it was about a month and a week or something like that. You had put out a video and you said, because you didn't like what Marlon had said, right? He was talking about you kind of like ducking him or whatever. And you said, I'd be happy to whoop your ass. I believe were your words in February. And here we are in February, right? You get the fight in February. So did it all line up kind of perfectly for you?
Yeah, it lined up. I don't really appreciate when people give like half narratives, like if you're gonna tell the whole story, tell the whole story, it wasn't like this thing where I had like a ton of time to get ready for it. It would have been 3 weeks after I had just fought for a month. So that kind of annoys me, like when fighters do that, or kind of when anyone does that. So yeah, I did get a little bit annoyed, and I kind of figured that we were gonna fight in February anyways, which is kind of what I was suspecting and what I heard the UFC was trying to work out. So yeah, it's working out good. I'm glad that I got the fight, and I'm glad that I got the fight during a time that I want.
And it's 5 rounds. Do you prefer that? Do you prefer that it's 5 rounds? Do you feel like at this point, I mean, you fought for a title before, but do you feel like at this point in top contention and stuff like that, you want those 5 round fights, or would have you rather had it at 3?
No, I really prefer 5 round fights now. I think that I think more often than not they take away like chance. Like I think over a 25-minute period of time versus a 15-minute period of time, you have more of an opportunity to show that you're better. Just because you have 10 more minutes, and everyone's pretty good until they get a little bit tired, and then I think the real fighting starts to happen when people get a little bit tired, and that's when you can really test your skills and see if they actually work, because there's a lot of athletes in the sport and in the division, and I think that I like fighting guys when they lose those superpowers, because then it's really a technical bout.
What do you think of Marlon in terms of 5 rounds?
I think Marlon will be able to go all 5 rounds pretty good. He's shown that in the past. I think his style is pretty conservative, so he does a good job of setting a pace for 5 rounds that is like a smart pace. So.
And yeah, what do you make of that? Because he seems to be a bit of a slow starter. We saw it against Frankie Edgar. We saw it against Dominic Cruz, and he ends up finishing them. So, is it? Do you think it's more of what his opponents are doing wrong, perhaps getting too comfortable, or do you think this is just kind of Marlon's style, something you have to watch out for, that he is a slow starter and not to get maybe too overexcited in the early rounds?
Yeah, maybe it's like he doesn't really do much, so maybe the guys get bored and they lose interest and focus, and then that's when he catches them. But no, I think that I think Marlon does. He definitely starts pretty slow, but I think that has to do with a lot of the same thing that I was just saying before, where I don't really see Cheeto as a super athletic guy, especially compared to a lot of the other people in the division, especially, in professional MMA at the top of the UFC. I don't really see him as a particularly athletic guy. So I think that he kind of has to have people lose those powers in order for him to compete really well with them. And he does do a good job of like sucking those powers out of them with his pressure and with a lot of the tools and stuff that he uses. But I think that that's more or less where that comes from, is because he has to fight on an even plane. And I think a lot of these guys are a lot more athletic than him. And his ability to like take that away from them is one of his stronger advantages.
Have you been impressed by his recent run?
Not really, honestly. Um, I think the way that he's been winning is not a reliable way to win. I think when I think about like some of the best fighters in the world, or what I foresee me trying to become is which is the best fighter in the world. It doesn't involve a lot of unreliable winning. It involves strategically beating them in every moment and having just very reliable ways to win, whether that be like takedowns, whether that be just being a better kickboxer, whether that be submissions, whatever that is. I don't think that it can be lose most of the fight and then catch the person in one of the later rounds, which is how he beat Frankie. I think he caught Font a little bit earlier, but that's kind of how he beat Font, because Font was winning a lot of minutes of that fight. And then that's how he beat Cruz, because he, again, was losing against Cruz for a lot of that fight. So it's not a super reliable way to win. I don't think it's going to work against me. And that's kind of the way that I feel about his style.
How do you feel about fighting at the UFC Apex? I believe it was Sean O'Malley who said he feels that the smaller cage may be doing a disservice to your style because you move around a lot. You just fought at the Apex against Song Yudong, but what are your thoughts on fighting at the Apex?
I think that that's Sean projecting something that he doesn't like about fighting in the small cage. I don't like in the small cage. At first, I'll be honest, it did feel really small when I fought Sterling in it the first time. I walked in there, I was like, oh man, this is a lot smaller than the 30-foot one. But I kind of appreciate the challenge, and I like the challenge of having to fight more. You know, like when there's a smaller cage, there isn't a lot of room to move around, which I'm okay with now, which is something that was challenging maybe in the beginning, but now I've enjoyed having that challenge. And I think that just being in a smaller cage and me having to fight a little bit more close and give them more opportunities has just made me a lot better of a fighter.
I remember last time we spoke, it was a while back. You were saying you were hoping that you weren't going to be on those Apex shows anymore, and you got Song Yudong after we spoke, and now again at the Apex. So are you disappointed with the whole no crowd thing, or at this point, are you kind of just accustomed to it?
Everything that I kind of like care about, I care about like this much. So like fighting at like this much, would I rather fight on a show where my family and friends can come, like before all of this COVID stuff had happened? I would much prefer that. But like I said, I kind of care like this much. So it's not that big of a deal to me. But like I said, I do kind of miss when a bunch of my friends would come out to the shows, a bunch of my training partners would come out to the shows. We would hang out before, we would hang out after. Like that was a really fun part. And now we get stuck in like this residence inn hotel that's just like gross from being used so many times. And so that part, it is a little bit worse. But like I said, like I don't try to have opinions. My job is just to go into the cage and beat the other person up. So that's really where my focus and my energy goes.
Yeah, and according to Sean O'Malley, he says he's number one contender. Like he's gonna get the shot of the projected fight between Sterling and Henry Cejudo. What are your thoughts on that? Because it seems like your fight with Chito is high stakes, right? So do you feel like with a statement win that you could perhaps leapfrog Sean O'Malley, or what are your thoughts in general of him being dubbed as the number one contender?
No, I definitely foresee that as a scenario. The UFC says a lot of things and then changes their mind a lot. And I'm hoping that this will be one of those situations. There's no contract signed for O'Malley to fight either one of those two. So, yeah, I don't, as long as there's not a contract signed, I think that the UFC will do what they want. And I think that if I can make a statement win and I can go out there and show that I'm the top dog, then I definitely think that I could either jump him or even face him for that number one contender spot.
And Henry Cejudo's returning, of course, and he's getting that title shot, which I guess in a way caused this logjam, right? Because if O'Malley is the #1 contender, he would have been next in line. So, what are your thoughts on the return of Henry Cejudo, and how do you see him doing against Aljamain?
Yeah, I think I care this much again, but Cejudo, Cejudo, I think is a really great fighter. I think obviously he's a great fighter. I'm really interested to see what happens in the Sterling Cejudo fight. I know that one thing that people don't really understand about Sterling is that he's a very physical and very big guy for the weight class, and Cejudo definitely isn't going to be at 135. And I think that that really goes a long way at some point. So it's like hard to call just like any fight, but I think that Cejudo will be able to wrestle him. I think Sterling has good jiu-jitsu, but where he's good at jiu-jitsu is really particular. Like he's really good on top and on the back. He has like some things that he does really well off of his back too, but they're kind of hard to see because he doesn't really do. People just don't follow him to the ground, so that's kind of hard to tell. I don't know if Cejudo will keep it standing or try to take him down or whatever, but I think Cejudo is going to be able to stuff all the shots. He's definitely not going to be giving up his back that much, so it's going to be very hard for Sterling to get there. So it might just be a not so exciting kickboxing fight between two wrestler guys like we've seen in the past. But yeah, I'm excited to see how he does. I really don't know.
Does the return of Henry Cejudo, him being a potential opponent for you in the future, is that exciting for you? Former dual champ. I mean, it's a pretty good name to have on your resume, right?
Yeah, definitely. Who knows how long that guy's going to be around? I don't really think about Cejudo too much, just because like he could retire after this one or go up to 45, like he's saying. So I would love to fight him in the future. I haven't really gotten that far in my brain because he kind of is just coming back right now. But yeah, I would love to fight Cejudo in the future, and if he sticks around and doesn't act super crazy and do a bunch of weight class shifting and all of this stuff, then that would be great.
Well, speaking of Cejudo, he did say, because he likes to break down a lot of fights, that he felt like if Marlon couldn't wrestle you, that he's in trouble. Is that a way you look at the fight, that for Marlon to have success against you, he'd have to wrestle? Not that that's been too much of his approach in fights, but what do you think of that?
Uh, Maybe that's a good idea. Marlon definitely doesn't have the grappling capabilities to be able to do what he wants to me in the grappling world, whether that be wrestling or on the ground. So that's not really a concern of mine. I'm definitely going to prepare for everything, but I don't think Cheeto has the pedigree of grappling, wrestling, jiu-jitsu to be a threat to me. Really at all. I don't really, like, I wonder why Cejudo would have said that. Probably because
I think he just loves wrestling. I think
again, another projection. And that's these guys' interviews, and I like hearing what they say, is because a lot of what a lot of people say on here is just projections of their own beliefs. So that's clearly how Cejudo would try to beat me. So that tip, Henry.
Well, is it safe to say you kind of envision a 5-round kickboxing match with Marlon, or do you feel like you can get him out of there before?
I don't. He seems like a tough guy to finish, honestly. So that's definitely not going to be the plan. But sometimes when that's not the plan, that's usually when it works out the best. Sometimes knocking people out is easiest when you're not trying to do it that much. I could see it going 5 rounds. I could also see it being cut short. He definitely has a chin on him. I definitely have a chin on me. So more likely than not, I see it going 5 rounds. But I also, like I said, I think that I've improved a ton in the grappling arts. I think that my wrestling is a lot better. My jiu-jitsu, which I've been doing with Ryan Hall for the last 3-4 years now, has gotten really, really good. So I think that I also have those tools where I could take him out in that way too. So I think that as far as ways to win, I definitely have more ways to win than Cheeto does.
I wanted to get your thoughts on TJ Dillashaw. He had just fought Aljamain, and he said he came in like with a bad shoulder. He knew popped a couple of times. Now he's saying he's retired, but he's not sure if he's retired. what are your thoughts just in general of Dillashaw's performance against Aljamain? Were you surprised with the way the fight played out?
Yeah, I think it was. I don't really know how to say this professionally because I don't like being like a very provocative guy, but I think that was wrong of TJ to do. I think that if your shoulder's coming out like multiple times, you can't really expect that to not happen in the fight. Like you definitely should have pulled out of the fight and had someone else jump into that position. In my opinion, that would have been the gentleman's thing to do. But I also understand that we're a bunch of warriors and we don't really care about each other's lives and about each other's feelings or the livelihood of each other in some regard. Everybody definitely has their different scales of how much they care about the other humans that are in their division with them. But yeah, TJ, I suppose, showed that he doesn't really care too much about the other people, which is, like I said, fine, because I understand that what we're doing is combatives. It's not like we're not playing soccer or basketball or something. So I get it. You know, I don't judge him for it, but I do think that it was not the coolest move.
Do you think he comes back?
No, I think that after another shoulder surgery, he's going to be how old? Who's even going to? Maybe he'll come back for like a big fight or something like that. But how old is he? He's like 38 or something now. He's got to be
37 or something like that.
like probably not, especially in the past, probably using drugs and stuff. Like, I don't really think that your body recuperates the same way, especially getting older and having that type of history. Probably not.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with one final one. Aljamain is kind of teasing a potential move to 45. He talks about kind of passing the torch to his teammate Marab or whatnot. But for you, would you be disappointed if Aljamain moved up and you just didn't get the chance to run things back with him?
I think even if he does move up, I'll probably follow him. I would really like to get that fight back, so maybe in the future that'll happen. I actually really commend Aljamain on making a move like that. Whether he follows through with it is a different story, but I think that him doing that for his close buddy is something that says a lot about Aljamain, and I really commend him on being that type of friend and speaking about people caring about other people. I think that that's really cool when you can also care about the people that you're competing against to some level of degree, which I appreciate Aljamain doing. But like I said, we'll see if he does it.
Yeah. Well, Cory, I appreciate you doing this. It's good to catch up with you again, and best of luck against Marlon on February 18th.
Yep. Thanks, Farah.